suggests that 4 people died and everyone else was badly hurt.
8 people were badly hurt and everyone else died.
Completely destroyed. 12 people were killed instantly, but everyone else died later.
6 buildings were destroyed, no other buildings were harmed, 3 people died and...
Thought to have been caused by a munitions explosion in a gas factory. Police say...
And we can go live now to Washington and our worldly political procedures correspondent, Will Parker, who's there. Will, what can you tell us?
Well, Ben, what we're being told here is that the Secretary of Defense is due here behind me any minute now. We were originally told that it would be 2 o'clock, but that's now been revised outwards by another 5 minutes or so. But of course, that all depends on when he actually appears.
Now, of course, there's been a lot of speculation about what Mr. Rumsfeld is actually going to announce today. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, Ben, I have to say that speculation here in Washington has been at least as much to do with what Mr. Rumsfeld isn't going to say as it has been about what he might or might not say when he arrives any minute now behind me.
Its authors say that the problem of obesity is currently costing the NHS £16 billion a day and could eventually lead to many of our biggest hospitals literally collapsing.
Our morbid obesity correspondent Amanda Panda has this report.
Walk down any street in Britain today, like this one I'm walking down now, and you're surrounded by wobbling fat.
We know, for instance, that he isn't going to say anything about what we originally thought he was going to talk about. But then again, I think we knew that already. That's just not his style.
Will, what more can you tell us about what we thought he was going to say?
Ben, that's an interesting one. What I can tell you is that Mr. Rumsfeld is very much his own man, and whatever he says when he appears behind me in just a few moments' time, it'll be exactly what he means. Because, as we know, that's very much his style.
Whatever Mr. Rumsfeld does say, Will, and of course we'll know that very shortly, what more can you tell us?
Hello, I'm Dan Evans in London.
And I'm Tom Mitchell in New York.
And I'm Michelle Wong in Hong Kong.
And I'm Kyoko Ogura in Tokyo.
And I'm Katharina Schultheis in Berlin.
And you're watching World Money Today.
World Money Today.
With me, Johan Fleischer in Geneva.
And me, Francis Javier Menezes in Buenos Aires.
And I'm Todd Todmore in Johannesburg.
And me, Brett McKenzie in Sydney. G'day.
And me, Dan Evans in London.
For now, at least, it's over before it gets worse. Miles Anderton, IBS News, Brantford, Florida.
Miles Anderton there with that report from upstate Florida. Julia, if you had to choose something to get stuck up a tree of yours, what would it be?
Well, Anthony, it wouldn't be a skunk, that's for sure.
Julia, that's for sure.
It's 10 after 5, Worldwide Weather-Wide Update now with Alicia.
It's 10 after 5.
Well, Julia, let me tell you, if you're living in Uttar Pradesh, India right now, you've got other things on your mind than skunks.
You bet.
In the last 24 hours, the area around Gorakhpur, right here next to the border with Nepal, has had 8 times its annual quota of rainfall in, check this, 2 hours.
Sheesh.
2 hours?
That's wet. Julia, you ever been that wet?
Anthony, I gotta say I haven't.
I believe you. You'd have to be some kind of fish.
That is wet.
It is, and it's all because of...
Today, that same 9-stone woman would weigh almost 15 stones. So why are we all so horrifically fat?
Sometimes I think I wish I was thinner, like everybody else does. But then I think, you know, I wouldn't be me, and that's like, I don't know.
Gargantua, which isn't her real name, is only 32. As a teenager, she led a normal, active life, played hockey for her school, and even had 2 brothers.
I used to have a good time. At weekends, I had boyfriends coming out my ears.
And now?
I tend to stand a lot and eat food.
And do you think you eat too much?
It's like I don't eat between meals, right?
And how many meals do you eat a day?
7.
But these days it seems that most of us would prefer to leave dying to others and instead exercise our rights to buy a second home in either France or Italy.
In the meantime, the pensions time bomb is ticking, and the harsh truth is that it's not a myth and that it will explode. Richard Harbinger, PBS News, at the Department of Pensions.
Richard Harbinger there with that report.
That report from Richard Harbinger.
You're watching PBS News with Francis
Walsh and Adam
Lockwood. Coming up later, we'll have the latest. But we return now to our
main story tonight. New Home Office figures out today reveal that for the first
time in Britain, more than 2/3 of teenagers are now criminals.
Our social disasters correspondent Sam Henman has been
looking at the report.
This Home Office report paints a picture of today's teenagers in Britain as dangerous, stupid and out of control. Its authors conclude that a significant majority of today's teenagers, perhaps 70 out of as many as 100%, are now effectively feral, roaming Britain's urban landscapes at night in packs of up to 15 at a single time.
Coming up, is there life on Mars? NASA thinks.
Now, did this small boy really meet God? We'll have...
Is Madonna dead? More on that story.
Stay with us.
Coming up
shortly.
Stay tuned.
Moments ago, we thought we saw some movement through that door, which I don't think you can quite see behind me. But in fact, it turned out to be another man. What I can tell you, Ben, is that Mr. Rumsfeld is a man in no mood to mince his words, no matter what words he decides to choose to use, or indeed not use. And of course, we'll know that very shortly indeed.
And in the meantime, Will, what are people saying there as they wait for Mr. Rumsfeld to appear behind you about the possible significance of what he will have said, assuming, of course, that he has said it?
Well, Ben, that's very interesting, because if indeed he...
Tennis now, and the International Tennis Federation has announced plans to ban players from grunting, yelping and gargling when hitting strokes in a bid to put opponents off. Shouting random words such as wallop, gotcha and yippee-ki-yay will also be outlawed.
Football now, and Wayne Rooney may find himself electronically tagged during the World Cup.
Catch up with what's been happening wherever you think you are. Have a nice time. See you later. Bye now. Take care.
Hello, welcome to Lookout East with Phil Kerdridge and Sarah Holt.
The top stories from around this region where you are tonight.
Bungay, the town where crack cocaine is freely available from men with hoods on the street corner. We've a special report.
And it's official. A damning new report says that the flow of East European prostitutes through Thetford is now out of control. An exclusive report coming up.
All that, and Russ is here with the weather, aren't you, Russ?
Indeed I am, Phil, yes.
You're looking very sprightly, Russ. Good weekend.
Yes, not so bad, thank you, Sarah. Managed to get out the old mower and give the grass a once-over. Always good for the soul and keeps the wife happy.
Yes, I see your team didn't do so well at the weekend.
Oh, well, there you go. You can't win them all.
What is it Ipswich supporters say? Some you lose, some you draw.
Steady on.
Yeah, that's a bit rich, coming from a Norwich girl like you.
A girl? It's a while since I've been called a girl.
Ah, well, you'll always be a girl to us, won't you, Russ?
Indeed she will, Phil, yes.
More from Russ later.
What is the correct term these days? It's hard to say. Woman? Sounds a bit formal.
No, I'll settle for girl. Girl's fine.
Lady? Oh, that sounds even worse. Anyway, more from Russ later.
I'm not sure I've ever been called a lady.
No, well, as they say, let's not go there.
Don't go there.
OK, now, prostitution. Ask any Thetford resident, and until recently, they'd probably have told you it was just a bit of harmless...
That young people today carry with them the facility to move seamlessly between their GCSE studies and violent lawlessness without making any distinction between the two. Justin Ruston, ESN News, Pinner.
That report from Justin Ruston coming up.
Stay with us.
And we go live now to Justin Ruston, who's still standing outside that same school there in Pinner. Justin, what more have you got to say there tonight?
Katie.
Finally, Ewan McGregor says he won't appear naked in his upcoming zombie flick.
He's now officially fat.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Coming up later, we round up all the latest celebrity anorexics.
But enough of this tittle-tattle. It's time for far more serious issues as we get up close and very personal with our man in LA. Who's got the news on the schmooze? It's Josh Cashman.
Hello, you lucky, lucky people.
So, Josh, we hear Cherry Listen caused something of a stir on the red carpet last night?
Oh my God!
Talked about more and more would be simply to reclassify some schools as prisons, literally changing the signs at the front of the building, thereby solving the problem at a stroke.
Justin, thanks. Justin Ruston there in Pinner, still to come.
That report from Justin Ruston. Coming up.
Stay with us. You're watching ESN News with Katie Tate and Richard Pritchard. Stay with us. Coming up.
Still to come. A roundup of our reminders of all the news still to come so far. All that still to come. But first...
Coming up, a reminder of...
Obviously, the Chemical Telecoms merger with STD is proving big news today, with both sides heralding it as the smoothest, most successful operation of its kind in recent years.
Isn't it just a bit of flim-flam, though, Mitch? It's always the same when companies merge. It's all giving it the duvet, I love you, darling. 5 minutes later, the knives are out, job cuts all around. You'd get less blood on the carpet playing Twister in a room full of tickly ninjas. 4 weeks later, everyone will be giving it the old belly knackers about being sold down the Swanee on a leaky pigeon wing, won't they?
Denied claims that some guardsmen were no longer being issued with busbies, but were instead being forced to grow their own hair into the shape of the famous.
So, what are the crimes this new breed of teenage criminals are committing? Well, probably the first wave of terror came with happy slapping, a phenomenon whereby adolescent thugs would attack random members of the public and video it on their camera phones for the amusement of their sick friends. Then came flash gobbing, a sick variation of the flash mobbing craze, where kids would arrange via text or the web to meet each other en masse at a designated time and place and spit at unsuspecting individuals. Victims say they are left feeling shaken, disturbed, wet and yucky. There's also been a rise in e-gingering, a high-tech variation of knockdown ginger, where juvenile delinquents hack into your computer and send you emails posing as friends of yours and pretend to invite you to weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs or other social gatherings. Another crime on the increase is eye-dissing, where web-savvy teenagers find ways of electronically stealing your identity, metaphorically driving it around the block, smashing it up and eventually setting fire to it. Then, of course, there's mind rape, which speaks for itself. And a worrying upsurge in web voodoo, or woo voodoo, as it's become known.
Resulted in the wrong leg being amputated twice.
Whole town was set alight.
Gas explosion in a munitions factory.
That the disease could infect a third of the world's population within the next...
This woman is a moron! She got invited to the premiere of this new movie, The Last Ocean. And remember how Liz Hurley started off this whole thing of the show-stopping red carpet appearance in that dress? And ever since we've had the shorter dress, the see-through dress, that poncho, tra-la-la. Well, Cherry obviously sat at home and racked her brain cell and thought, how can I outdo those? And so this is what she came up with. That no dress. She turned up to this premiere, and if I'm lying, I'm dying, not wearing anything, not a stitch. Unfortunately, she made a slight miscalculation. She forgot that it's a kids' film, and it's got a bunch of kids in it. And they were all there, of course, because it's a kids' film, and there are the kids in it. I mean, hello, or should I say goodbye? 2 words, humiliation. And she actually had the audacity to blame it on her designer. 2 words, Emperor's New Clothes.
That's actually 3 words, Josh.
Oh, yeah? Well, I got 2 words for you.
A lot of speculation, and much of it, I have to say, speculation. Not only about the form of the words that Mr. Rumsfeld will use when he appears behind me any minute now, but also about the precise order in which he may or may not use them.
And, Will, what more do we know about what you mean by that?
What we have to remind ourselves is that...
You're watching PVS News with Adam
Lockwood and Francis
Walsh. Back now to our main story tonight, and there's been swift
action around the clock to new Home Office figures which reveal that Britain's
teenagers are now operating mostly outside the law. Our reporter Katie Willard is in one of London's more youth-ridden areas, and she joins us now. Kate, where are you?
Yes, indeed, Adam. I'm here on the High Cross Meadows estate here in East London, an area which was singled out in the Home Office report today as particularly juvenile. Built in the 1970s as part of an idealistic social disaster, the intention was to provide innovative, good quality living space for those who couldn't afford the real thing. However, its reputation quickly became stained by suggestions of urine and other issues, and by the mid-80s it had been earmarked for an extensive programme of demolition. Now, I've got with me here Richard Asiedu, East London's Housing Liaison Officer for the estate. Now, Richard, you've been Housing Liaison Officer here for the last 4 years. What's your response to the Home Office report today?
Well, I have to say from the outset,
right.
I have to say that I don't think anyone who lives and works in this community is going to recognise the description of its young people given in the report.
Right.
First of all, there are a number of major misconceptions which are presented as fact.
Right, well, clearly some very strong views surrounding this whole issue here.
So, Josh, what is the reaction?
What do you think? Everyone's just like applauding her. The parents are outraged. They're talking about emotional damage to the kids. This could scar them psychologically for years.
Is it that serious?
Oh, absolutely. Totally not. You could just see them thinking, this is fantastic. Followed by chat show, followed by ka-ching.
So, Josh.
Built in the 1970s, largely from concrete, as is so often the case with estates such as these. The 1970s, of course, a time long before today, a time when concrete itself was young, a time...
How can you not find it funny? Although there is a very serious downside. This could be the beginning of something. We could be seeing the erosion of our shared social values, and that is a real concern. What if Robin Williams turns up naked to his next premiere? Can you imagine? Oh, please! Do you want to see that? I'd rather watch one of his movies, and they're awful.
Just time now for a quick look at tomorrow's paper.
Look back at today's paper.
Roundup of last night's papers.
Thanks, Sarah. We're getting reports just in of an incident on the A989 just south of Junction 4 where a lorry has overturned and shed its load of cars. Long delays there now due to a sudden increase in the amount of cars on the road. And I'm afraid that's a story for a lot of us right now, as we can see if we take a look out on the roads.
brought up her own 2 children on the estate, here in this very flat, in fact. And she's also a single mother. So in a way, perhaps, she's more qualified than most to comment on the Home Office report. Vicky, hi.
Hi.
Now, I know you've had some really quite disturbing experiences at the hands of precisely the sort of teenage criminals described in the report.
Yeah, that's right.
What were they, exactly?
They were boys.
Right. And what were the experiences?
Well, they were very unpleasant. These boys are constantly hanging around the lifts.
Right.
They are doing drugs. They often urinate in there.
Yes.
And no one dares do nothing about them because they have knives.
Right.
Maybe even guns.
Right, and I gather your daughter suffered serious physical intimidation on several occasions.
Yeah, well, this is the worst thing of all.
Right, thanks, Vicky. But are things really as bad as they seem?
And while the dispute between the librarians and PACT, the Producers Alliance for Cinema and Television, continues, it's currently impossible to film new footage of libraries. These library pictures were filmed some...
A8, the scary circus, cars back to back out there, not because they've run into each other, just very close together. A313113, the IKEA bear pit, long tail...
Attendant insurance implications. He said to be taking it very seriously.
Is he? And I've just won the swimwear section in Miss World. Hooray! I love the way we're meant to feel sorry for these guys, Mitch. He's absolutely minted. He's still picking up the bonus as fat as a faddle. He is laughing all the way to the bank. When he gets there, he's laughing even more. It's his bank. This is a classic case of having your cake and eating it and coming back for cheesy biscuits. And tiramisu, isn't it?
Well, a key part of that process has been a buddying scheme, under which young boys at risk of stabbing people for money are partnered with an older boy who tries to stop them. With me here now are Joe and Malcolm, both currently taking part in the scheme, and also with them is Carl Jacobs, who is actually an adult. Now, Joe here, you're 14 and you're currently Buddy E on this scheme, and Malcolm here is 17 and is acting as your Buddy-er. So what difference has this scheme made to you?
Well, basically, man tried to take me off-road, innit? Try to help me get my head straight, you get me?
Yes.
So, yeah, and he used to go to his yard, yeah, go to his yard, go to my yard as well, yeah.
Right.
Tell me, blood, you don't need to shop crap, blood, you don't need to bun weed, you get me? So, he's my brethren now, innit? So we're cool, yeah, and he used to tell me, blood, you're a top boy, blood, you're a big boy, you never know, blood, you can be a massive boy, yeah.
Right.
Blood. Yeah, standard, blood, that's a rude way to think. Standard.
Well, as you can see, a lot of very different thoughts here in East London tonight. And clearly this is a debate which will continue to play out across estates like High Cross Meadows in the months to come. Adam.
Kate, thank you. Katie Willard there in East London.
That report from Katie Willard in East London there.
Other news now. And
on the plus side, his hair will obscure a lot of his body. But on the downside, we'll see his hairy body.
Right. Josh seems to have lost the ability to talk with words, so we'll leave it there. Thanks, Josh. See you next time.
Yeah, next time you bring your mom.
Wave of prostitution and its related problems of drug abuse and violent crime. But one thing looks certain. It may be the oldest profession, but here in Thetford, it's one profession that isn't going away anytime soon. Penny Watson in Thetford for Lookout East.
That report there from Penny Watson in Thetford. Nice town too.
It's lovely, Thetford.
It looked cold though. I thought our Penny looked cold. You know Thetford, Russ?
Oh yes indeed, I know it well. As a matter of fact, I had a girlfriend there once.
Oh, really?
Brings back some nice memories. Can get cold though there, I do remember that.
We won't ask why you remember that.
Best not perhaps, just in case the wife's watching at home.
Oh yes, you don't want to upset Mrs. Russ.
Indeed not.
Let's not go there.
Don't go there.
Indeed not, pull out.
Okay, anyway, more from Russ later.
Honestly, boys. Now, in less than 20 years' time, most of East Anglia will have disappeared. That's a rather worrying...
All the news so far.
That's still to come. Stay with us. But first, coming up next, a look back at what's still to come on tonight's programme.
Irritable trowel syndrome, how too much gardening could damage your arms.
Dead wood. As our climate changes, how trees are set to become a thing of the past.
Head over heels when it comes to the women in their lives, why some men prefer head over heels.
And AIDS. With a number of cases in Britain on the increase again, we have the complacency.
All that still to come, but first, here's Melanie with the standing news. Melanie.
Katie, thank you. I'm Melanie Bellamy, and this is the standing news. Now, as we heard in Justin Rustin's report earlier, reaction to those Home Office figures released today, showing that 2 out of every 3 in 5 of today's teenagers are criminals, has ranged all the way from sheer disbelief, through sheer belief, and onto, I told you so, we've been saying this for ages, but no one believed.
A943, the gastric tentacle, again very slow moving when it is moving. A604 sanity bypass backed up as far as the eye can see and even further, I'm afraid.
Heard from the politicians, the academics, the experts, even the police. But what about the criminal teenagers themselves? We can go live now to our reporter, Stuart Fruitt, who's in Manchester. Stuart, where are you exactly?
Well, Melanie, I'm in Manchester, as you say, but I'm afraid I'm not able to tell you exactly where that is for legal reasons. But Manchester, of course, home originally to the Gallagher brothers, a city with more than its fair share of northern problems, such as violent drug-related crime, insolence and spitting.
50,000 people gathered in London for the latest in a series of protests against the weather. Organisers blame the poor attendance on the weather, which they say...
I'm Anita Rajatani, and this is 15 Seconds. The headlines this hour. At home, the government okays a new nuclear reactor in Norfolk. In international news, France anger over New Zealand claims. And sport, Effrey is out. That's it for now. More later.
What do you know about what you can tell us about that, Will?
Ben, that's an interesting one. What I can tell you about what I can tell you is that one of the things people are starting to say here is that...
Different perspective on this story. We go live now to space to join our correspondent Nick Burnham, who's embedded exclusively for ESN News on the NASA Space Station programme. Nick, from your unique vantage point up there, how big a problem do these crime figures represent?
Well, Melanie, that's an interesting one. I'd have to say that in the time I've been out here in space, I've spent a lot of time, and when I say a lot of time, I mean a lot of time looking down at the Earth. And I'd have to say that tonight the Earth looks very, very similar. It might feel different to you down there. Perhaps it's a world filled with more danger, more fear, but to us in space, it looks exactly the same as it always does. Small and distant.
The closing of the plant means job losses of up to 1,000.
Ouch.
Anthony, it's a lot of jobs for that community to lose.
That's for sure. That's something you don't want to have.
Right.
1,000 is too many. It's too big a number.
Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families affected.
They sure do. Here's Alicia now with a worldwide weather-wide update.
Anthony, thank you.
Repeat of last year's Tour de France when a group of 12 riders ended up in Austria. Some of them in cars, despite...
Some of us are worried about loved ones becoming the victims of crime back at home, but then we have to remember that statistically speaking, it is very unlikely. And as one of my crewmates pointed out, I am more likely to be hit by an asteroid. Apparently that is quite possible.
And finally, Nick, on the evening these new crime figures were announced, can you sum up for us the mood out there in space?
In a word, the same. Melanie.
Nick, thank you. Nick Burnham there in space. Katie.
Melanie, thank you. Melanie Bellamy there with this standing news.
Melanie, thank you. Stay with us. Still to come.
Coming up, you're watching ESN News with Katie Tate and Richard Pritchard. Next, a reminder of some of our earlier headlines. Coming up.
But first, coming up, fly in the ointment, as hundreds of thousands in the Central African Republic of Chad suffer skin rashes caused by polluted drinking water. Britain pledges to fly in the ointment which could cure it.
And hard cheese, how cheese is getting more...
Scenes of jubilation when thousands took to the street following Great Britain's 4x4 relay team's dramatic third place in the European Athletics Championships in Helsinki.
Less than a tenth of the amount of drizzle we'd normally expect, I think.
Area around Kinababin in Tajikistan has actually experienced no temperature of any kind for more than 4 months now. And if we take a look at the...
A11, Naughty Underpass. I'd be seething. A480, the Cardiac Slipway. Livid. A237, Wobbly Mishmash. Brrr.
Problem of childhood obesity prompting Frankie Dettori to warn that racing may need to introduce Shire horses to carry the next generation of fat jockeys.
Young people today are obese and they are criminals. One must lead to the other. We need to send them to slimming camps or do what they do in Japan and make them wrestlers. Simple as that. Thanks for that, Ricardo.
No one takes responsibility for their actions. Everyone passes the buck. I blame society. Society is to blame. That's a text from Emma. It's quite a profound point there.
Young people...
All that coming up later on Film and Movie News. But first, we take a look at Walking with Death, the new movie starring John Logano. It's a loose follow-up to the wonderful The Rainbow Killers, and earlier this week I talked exclusively to him about the film. John Logano, Thanks very much for joining us. I know you're extremely busy at the moment, and I really do appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure.
Before we begin, can I just say what a privilege it is to be actually speaking to you? I'm a huge, huge fan, and I really do appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. And the stock market responded well, as you might expect.
Yeah, they're wetting the bed, and we're meant to believe it's going to be magically mopped up by unicorns and woodland folk. They're always saying things like this, Mitchell, aren't they? They're like a parrot DJing with a broken record. Nothing gets done, does it? It's all, you can ask me no questions, I'll give you no answers. You can polish my whistle, I'll play you no tune, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I don't know. New movie follows on from The Rainbow Killers, which I thought you were fantastic in, by the way. Absolute tour de force, one of the most brilliant...
Then everyone within a 100-mile radius of where I'm standing now would simply drown. Nick Andrews in what, for the next few years at least, is Halesworth, for Lookout East.
Nick Andrews there in Halesworth.
Lovely old town, Halesworth.
Yeah, sad really it's all going. What do you think, Russ?
Used to be a pub in it.
Oh, dear.
They are scum, and they should be exterminated like the vermin they are. Writes Bill in Bermondsey. Thanks, Bill.
The reason young people are criminals is that they are young. Old criminals were young once. They'll grow out of it. That's from Jose in Birmingham. I don't really understand that one.
The kids are all right. The cardigan and slippers posse should just pop a pill and chill. That's from Big D. Thanks for that, Big D.
I hate my boobs. I think they look too triangular. That's from Sam in Essex. I think that's in relation to our earlier piece on plastic surgery.
Young people grow up too fast these days. Scientists should find ways of stunting their...
Every film you're in, you somehow manage to steal every scene.
Time to review the papers from last Thursday.
Cast an eye over what the papers were saying on this day 10 years ago.
Intelligent, smart, engaging, warm, funny, sexy, brilliant, genius, charismatic.
I don't understand the way kids talk these days. They all sound like they're black. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I just think it's wrong. That's from Mick in the Isle of Dogs.
Not all children are bad. We have children and they're absolutely lovely. That's from Mummy and Daddy in Cumbria.
I believe children are the future. Teach them well and let them show the way. Whitney Houston said that. I think she's right. She was a good role model for children before she became a drug addict. Thanks to Jill in Birkenhead.
Well, how much more do you know about what you can tell us? Well, Ben, not much more than you...
Baker's Crisps 11 will play the Leicester Nachos in the Quattro Formaggio final at the Blubber Dome. Again,
John Logano, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure and a personal highlight of my life. I can die happy now. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Logano there, a fantastic actor who brings a guarantee of quality to every movie in which he appears, except this one. Sadly, unlike its terrific predecessor, The Rainbow Killers, Walking with Death is an absolute train wreck of a movie. It has one of the worst, most ill-judged opening sequences I've ever seen and contrives to go rapidly downhill from there. A risible storyline, appalling dialogue, and uniformly awful performances combine to make this one of the worst movies ever made. If you do go and see it, you'll want to tear out your own eyeballs and stuff them in your ears, just so you don't have to look at or listen to it anymore. But even then, simply knowing you're in the same cinema where it's on will make you want to chew off your own film.
Real sense here that this is a man who may say almost anything at all. Now, if that is how it plays out, and of course we'll know that in a very few number of moments from now, but if it is...
It's 22 days now since the group was taken hostage.
Whoa, 22 days. That's a lot of days.
Anthony, it is.
You're talking a lot more days than you'd want to be taken hostage for.
We're seeing an increasing number of these situations.
Okay, maybe a few days, but 3 weeks? Whew, that's like a month.
Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families.
Julia, amen to that. A month? It's too long. It's like a whole, I don't know, like a whole July or like a whole November. It's too...
Moving onwards now to yesterday, could lead to a higher sperm count than we'd usually expect at this time of the...
Ellen MacArthur's plans to sail her boat single-handedly around all the other boats in the world may run into...
informed opinion here in Washington who is saying that, frankly, they have no idea what he's going to say.
In which area could remain infected for up to 75 decades.
More of those upsetting pictures after the...
Stay with us.
Coming up.
Shortly.
Stay tuned.
Basically one big cloud of air.
Odd bit of mistiness just hanging on in some sub-Saharan...
I can see movement in the corridor behind me here. I don't know if you can see it, but it looks as if... Yes, it's him. Here he is now, flanked by his aides, the United States Secretary of Defense, Donald Trump.